Let's turn our attention toward the phones, and on the line, Julie Wernau from the Chicago Tribune. Talk a little bit about this state plan that would help nuclear plants by punishing carbon-based providers. Julie, good morning.
Good morning.
By the way, excellent piece in the paper a couple of days back.
Thank you.
So where do we stand? You know, we hear varying reports on the state of the nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants in our state. You got, obviously, there's been a movement afoot for a long time. Well, let's shutter them. Let's do something else. You got others who want to prop them up. What's the state right now?
Well, you believe it or not, we got a 269-page report out of a bunch of state agencies about the nuclear plants, and it's still a little bit unclear. So, reading through this report, there's one chart that's really kind of alarming. It sort of shows how much money these plants make versus how much they cost, which is something everybody can understand. And depending on which estimate you use in terms of how much it costs to run a nuclear plant, either these plants or none of them are making any money, or they're all doing fine.
Okay, so one of those clear reports that just leaves you no question unanswered.
Yeah. So what I will say is under sort of the most dire circumstances, which is an EPA estimate. I mean, they don't just pull these numbers out of thin air. Things are not looking too good for Illinois' nuclear plants. They're really not making any money and haven't been making any money for several years, including Byron. Although some of the things that we had been hearing from Exelon don't appear to be quite what we're finding in the numbers. So Exelon had been saying that Byron was one of the 3 plants that they really thought would be potentially slated for closure. Well, in this report, they're actually showing that Byron's doing better than some of the other plants, including Dresden, because of what they say are more expensive costs for those other plants. So we're sort of scratching our heads here looking at this report, and it's really unclear how it will be used going forward as they lobby to find a way to get these plants propped up.
Now, Julie, one thing perhaps clear from the report is no matter what, power costs are going up because either there's going to be an effort in Springfield to assist Exelon with these nuclear plants. That's going to cost money. Or the opposite would be, or the alternative could be, all right, we'll let some of these plants go dark, and then we need more green technology and new transmissions lines, and that costs billions of dollars too.
Yeah, that's right. Green technology can only sort of make up for so much of how much power a nuclear plant has. So, you'd end up actually having a lot of these plants being replaced with natural gas-fired power plants. And what this report is saying is that could be expensive. So either you pay to help keep them open or you pay to replace them. Either way, your electricity bills are going to go up.
Okay, now, under worst-case scenario, Quad Cities plant, least profitable of its plants in the state, would require nearly 50% higher revenues to be profitable. Wow, 50% more.
That's right. These are some pretty big numbers. And actually, in speaking with the company itself, they say that the Clinton plant, that some of the numbers in this report are a little off, and that they still say the Clinton plant is the one that really has the biggest trouble. So in order to make up for that revenue, we'd be talking about potentially a tax on carbon or some kind of program where they reward nuclear power as part of a larger push for renewable energy. Of course, nuclear power is not renewable energy, but they might include it in there saying, well, it doesn't emit carbon. So there's all these options. And what financial analysts say is that would be enough to keep the plants open. It's a significant amount of revenue that we'd be talking about to Exelon if there were a carbon tax.
Julie Wernau with us. She is with the Chicago Tribune, energy reporter. It's Riley and Scott here on WROK. There's a quote in your piece, Julie, by Howard Lerner from the Environmental Law Policy Center, saying we shouldn't bail out Exelon's old, uncompetitive nuclear plants. Instead, we should invest in new renewable energy like wind and solar, energy efficiency to grow a cleaner Illinois energy future. Isn't nuclear itself renewable and clean? Is that a real effective line of argument?
What you'll find is that there's a huge debate among environmentalists about whether or not nuclear power can be considered a clean energy. And many environmentalists will tell you absolutely not. Because it isn't being, it isn't renewable. I will say that renewable is something, that comes from, the sun or the wind that, happens every single day, and you don't have to go dig it up underground. But it doesn't emit carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas, and that's something that a lot of environmentalists care a lot about. And so they're torn in the environmental community about whether or not they think nuclear power is a clean energy. As you know, there's a lot of waste associated with nuclear power that is going to be around for ages. So that to them is not clean.
So if, let's take it all the way out to the worst case scenario. They determine none of these are going to work, and we're going to get rid of nuclear. We're going to do something else in this state, or we're going to keep it, and everything's going to remain the same. Regardless, consumers are going to get tagged with a lot more cost.
That's right. Something is going to have to change. Either Exelon is going to be able to successfully push to get some kind of extra money flowing to these plants, and in the end, that's something that's a cost to consumers, or some of these plants shut down and they provide some pretty cheap power to the state, and so more expensive forms of power would have to step up to replace it, and that would also mean electricity bills going up.
Julie Wernau with us from the Chicago Tribune. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. Toward the tail end of your piece, there's this no excuses policy, which we discussed on the show a few weeks ago. Last year during the polar vortex, and I guess we're in one now, too, and one above. But as it got so cold and power needs increased, you had coal-fired plants that could not function. Their conveyor belts froze. You had natural gas plants that couldn't obtain gas to burn for their energy, but the nuclear plants were running at 95% capacity. What value is in the fact that nuclear will continue to perform no matter what circumstances Mother Nature throws at us?
Well, according to the electric grid, quite a bit of value. They were as upset as anybody when, nobody was able to show up who promised to be there during the polar vortex. It was nuclear that they were relying on to keep the lights on during a really tough time, and some people, keeping their heat on, which was incredibly crucial. And so they're changing policies. They're trying to change a policy there that in order to reward forms of power that do show up. And truthfully, nuclear power stands to gain the most there. And so that's one way that there's a few different ways that Exelon a few different tricks, I guess, that Exelon has up its sleeve in order to try to gain a little bit more revenue other than going to the legislature. And they have been actively pursuing those methods, including this whole issue that came out of the polar vortex.
And really quickly, Julie, just to restate, one of the takeaways from this report is that the Byron plant, of course, close to us here in Rockford, might not be in quite as bad fiscal shape as previously thought, right?
That's right. One of the things that the Byron plant seems to have going for it is that it isn't as expensive to run as some of the other plants. And this is new information, according to the EPA. One of the difficulties that we've had here is that it's really Exelon does not release figures on a plant-by-plant basis in terms of how expensive they are to run. And so that has Byron doing a little bit better than we previously thought in this report. It's still, according to the EPA, though, it would be not making money for Exelon.
She's Julie Wernau with the Chicago Tribune. Outstanding piece. And Julie, thanks for taking time out of your Friday morning for us.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Have a great weekend.